get from the Battle of Seattle in 1999 to the battles for public spaces all over the country in 2011. But maybe a better way of looking at it is to consider the fact that a significant amount of progress has been made since 1999 in opposition to several thousand years of patriarchal domination by a small number of wealthy families. The blinders are finally coming off, and people in the U.S. are now becoming aware that while we may not have a king and queen, we still have royalty running the show. Only this time it's an economic royalty that has taken over. Just stop and think for a moment. Right now, there are only 400 families who own over 1/2 of everything that there is available to own in this country. If that isn't a picture of 400 royal families, I don't know what is. So how did we get this way, you ask? Obviously, the reasons are multiple, complex, and intertwined. But one seemingly common thread is something called bribery. As a schoolboy, I was shocked to learn about how institutionalized bribery was in the Soviet Union and other nation-states, particularly in some of the poorer countries. Naively, we thought that nothing like that could ever creep into our own culture. How simple-minded we were, because the United States has actually elevated bribery to a high art form in the guise of privately funded political machines and candidates. To let you know that I'm not the only person who sees the American political system as completely corrupt, from the bottom to the top, the very top I should add, I'm going to play 2 short audio clips of people who have significantly more experience in this area than I'll ever have. The first is a short excerpt from a recent interview that Jon Stewart did with Lawrence Lessig, and I'm going to follow that with a few words from Bernie Sanders, who is a U.S. Senator from the state of Vermont and who may be the only honest person in the Senate. So here are a couple of their thoughts about what's going on.
Our guest tonight, he is the director of the Edmund J. Safra Foundation Center for Ethics at Harvard University. I didn't know they had one of those. And a professor at Harvard Law School. His new book is called Republic Lost, How Money Corrupts Congress and a Plan to Stop It. Please welcome to the program, Lawrence Lessig.
I think the problem is we have a system for funding where 0.05% of Americans max out in a congressional campaign. 0.26% give more than $200. So campaigns are funded by the tiniest slice of Americans.
Not even the top 1%.
No. So the Occupy Wall Street people are so proud of we're the 99%, bad marketing. We're the 99.95% who doesn't have access the way the 0.05% have access because they fund the campaign. This is the thing that congressmen are obsessing about all the time. They spend 30 to 70% of their time raising money, which means they're constantly focused on shape-shifting to get the money and to avoid doing things that might drive the money away. So it's no surprise that when they live in this life, they become dependent upon the funders as opposed to the people. And that is the corruption. They are dependent upon, not as the framers said, the people alone, they're dependent upon the funders. Right, because they're going to be responding to this tiny slice of America, which they do again and again, and surprise, surprise, that leads the rest of Americans to believe, as a poll we did for the book concludes, that money buys results in Congress. 3/4 of Americans believe money buys results in Congress. The libertarians are really keen on getting a small government. I'm not into that. I mean, a lot of people are, but I respect it. But the point is, you're never going to get a small government or simpler taxes as long as congressmen depend upon having a big government and complex taxes so they have someone to call to raise money. So you've got a special tax benefit. Your tax benefit's about to expire. Congressman has somebody to call to say, we're going to need a lot of support if we're going to get this tax benefit extended. And so the point is to begin to see the way money links every issue we care about on the left and the right. I mean, obviously, issues on the left have been affected by money in this administration. But people on the right have got to recognize, too, that money blocks their ability to get what they're looking for. There's only one sacred text in this book, and that's Henry David Thoreau. For every 1,000 hacking at the branches of evil, there's one striking at the root. The point here is this is the root. The money is the root, and unless we find root strikers who are willing to strike at that root, we're never going to fix this problem.
I think what the protesters are doing in New York across the country is extremely important for 2 reasons. Number one, they are focusing attention on the most powerful entity in our country, which is Wall Street, which is also the most secretive and I believe the most dangerous. Let's never forget, that it was the greed and recklessness and illegal behavior of Wall Street which plunged us into this horrible recession, which resulted in millions of people losing their jobs, their homes, and their life savings. So we have got to continue to focus on the greed of Wall Street, and we've got to bring about real reforms to end the kind of abusive behavior that is taking place there. Second of all, I think it is absolutely appropriate that the protesters are now forcing a debate and a discussion in this country on the huge issue of income and wealth inequality. It is very hard. We're right here, right? The United States Senate is, the floor of the Senate is 100 feet away from us. And I got to tell you, there are very few people who talk about that issue. Something I've been talking about for years. But we do have to ask whether it is morally and economically appropriate that 400 people in this country own more wealth than the bottom half of America, 150 million people. So that discussion is terribly good. Now, where I hope this movement goes is to generate grassroots activism, bring more and more working families, middle-class people, young people into the political process, to demand a progressive agenda so that the Congress, so that state legislatures, local government, begins to respond to the needs of ordinary people rather than the incredible influence of big money.
I apologize for the quality of the Senator Sanders clip, but some of these interviews are hard to find and are often done by young people with only a cell phone to record the conversation. However, just because the corporate media doesn't give a voice to people like the senator, it doesn't mean that what they have to say isn't important. In fact, today the best news reporting isn't being done by the so-called professionals, but rather it's being done in small bits and pieces like the brief interview that we just heard. And as you could tell from the Daily Show clip, there's a lot more to the Lessig interview with Jon Stewart, and I'll link to that in the program notes for today's podcast in the event that you want to hear the entire interview, which I strongly urge you to do, by the way. So what I want to do now is to play part of an interview that my friend Wild Bill from New York City turned me on to. In fact, I think I even played the phone message where he told me about